What if I told you that watching pornography in your 60s could either strengthen your relationship or quietly tear it apart? That it might support intimacy or slowly drain your confidence? I'm Dr. James Ellison, a men's health specialist with over 30 years of experience helping adults in their 60s, 70s, and beyond reclaim their vitality, emotional connection, and sense of self. Today, we're talking openly and honestly about a topic many avoid: pornography. This isn't a moral lecture, it's a clear-eyed look, from a medical and emotional perspective, at how porn can impact older adults, often in ways that are misunderstood or ignored. You might think porn is just a younger man's issue. But what I'll show you today is how it deeply affects men over 60, sometimes in ways they never realize, and how certain quiet habits could be holding you back from real connection, better performance, or lasting self-respect. In this video, you'll discover the true psychological and neurological effects of porn on the aging brain, how it influences relationships, intimacy, and self-image, whether it helps or hinders sexual function, and a powerful tool to reset your habits and possibly improve your overall sexual and emotional well-being. By the end, you'll have the clarity to make your own decision, not from shame, but from strength. If you or someone you love feel stuck in a pattern of use that's no longer bringing joy. Before we begin, if you're interested in honest, respectful conversations about health, aging, and intimacy, I invite you to subscribe and tap the bell icon so you won't miss any future videos made with you in mind. If you find this helpful, type yes in the comments. If not, type no and let me know how I can better support your journey. Now let's take a closer look at the potential benefits of pornography for emotional well-being and sexual health. Especially in later life, one potential benefits of pornography for older adults. In my years of working with older adults, individuals in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, I've learned something many people overlook. Sexuality doesn't just disappear with age. It changes, yes, but it doesn't vanish. And for many older adults, pornography can be one of the few accessible ways to stay in touch with that part of themselves. Some of my patients have quietly admitted, often with a bit of embarrassment, that they still watch adult material. What surprises them most isn't my reaction, it's that I don't judge them for it. In fact, I remind them that there are potential benefits, especially when pornography is used mindfully and with intention. One of the most common benefits I hear about is the rekindling of sexual curiosity after retirement or after the loss of a long-term partner. Many older adults feel emotionally or physically disconnected from intimacy. Pornography, in some cases, reopens a door that's been closed for years. It can remind someone that desire still exists inside them and that it's okay to feel that spark again. I've had men and women tell me with tears in their eyes that watching something arousing made them feel alive again for the first time in a long while. For others, pornography can be a source of comfort. Loneliness is a deep and often unspoken burden in later life. Especially for those who live alone, pornography isn't a replacement for connection, but for some it fills a quiet, intimate space that has been left empty. It becomes less about sex and more about feeling something emotionally, physically, even spiritually. That might sound strange, but the human need for closeness doesn't end with youth. There's also a practical aspect for individuals facing physical limitations, chronic illness, or medication side effects that make partnered sex difficult or impossible. Pornography can provide a private, safe alternative. It offers a way to stay engaged with one's sexual self without the pressure or complications of physical intimacy. This is especially important when intimacy has become a source of anxiety or discomfort. In older age, finally, some older couples use pornography as a way to reconnect. They explore it together, not as a replacement for their relationship, but as a tool for inspiration, conversation, and sometimes even laughter. It opens up dialogue around fantasy, curiosity, and shared desires, topics that often go untouched in later life relationships, and that can be surprisingly healing. Of course, no benefit comes without risk, and just as pornography can awaken desire and connection, it can also create distance, dependency, or disillusionment when misused or misunderstood. That's why it's so important to talk about the other side, sucks, of the coin. What happens when pornography begins to take more than it gives? So what are the hidden dangers of pornography? Especially for older adults who may not realize they've crossed an emotional or behavioral line. That's what we're about to explore next. If you're still here and this message is resonating with you, just type yes in the comments to let me know you're with me. Now let's continue with the next important insight. 2. When pornography becomes a problem, especially in later life. Not long ago, a man in his early 70s sat in my office. His voice quiet, his eyes avoiding mine. He wasn't there for a physical issue, at least not directly. What he wanted to talk about was something far more private. He said, "Doc, I think I might be watching too much porn, and I don't even know if that's a real problem at my age, but it doesn't feel right anymore." That conversation has stayed with me, not because it was rare, but because it wasn't. In later life, many people assume that if someone is using pornography, it's harmless. At least they're not hurting anyone, they say. And while it's true that using porn isn't inherently bad, there's a line, and when crossed, it can quietly start taking more from someone than it gives. One of the most common signs I see in older adults is emotional withdrawal. What starts as an occasional escape can turn into a habitual pattern. Watching porn becomes easier than calling a friend or attending a community gathering over time. The screen feels safer than real connection, and gradually a person begins to isolate themselves, not intentionally, but quietly, day by day. That isolation, especially in later life, can be devastating to one's mental and emotional health. There's also the erosion of sexual confidence. Some men begin to notice they can no longer respond to a real partner the way they can to porn. They might lose the ability to become aroused by simple touch or even feel anxious or detached during physical intimacy. Women too may feel disconnected, especially if they feel compared to unrealistic portrayals of younger, digitally enhanced actors over time. This can damage self-esteem and create performance anxiety even in long-term loving relationships. And then there's habit, not addiction in the traditional sense, but something quieter. A pattern that becomes compulsive. It's not about watching for pleasure anymore. It's about filling time, numbing feelings, or escaping from thoughts no one else sees. It becomes the last thing someone does at night, or the first thing in the morning. They don't talk about it, but they know something's off. It feels more like a need than a choice. Some feel guilt. Others feel nothing at all, just a dullness they can't explain. That emotional flatness is one of the most overlooked effects when pleasure becomes mechanical and intimacy is replaced with repetition. Joy tends to fade from more than just the bedroom. It disappears from daily life. I've seen marriages drift quietly apart because one partner stopped reaching for the other and turned instead to a screen. I've seen widows and widowers feel ashamed for using something that once brought comfort, but now leaves them feeling empty. These are real struggles, and they deserve to be spoken about with empathy and understanding, not silence or shame. The truth is, recognizing when pornography stops being helpful and starts becoming harmful takes courage. It means listening to that quiet voice that says, "This doesn't feel good anymore." It means asking deeper questions. What am I really looking for? What's missing? And how do I get back to myself? But to fully understand why these patterns form, why they feel so powerful, even when they no longer bring joy, we need to look inside the brain itself, because the science behind how porn affects the aging brain might surprise you and change the way you see everything. 3. The science. How porn affects the aging brain. I've always believed that understanding the why behind our behaviors is often more powerful than judgment or advice. And when it comes to pornography, especially for older adults, the why lies deep inside the brain. Many people think the brain slows down in old age, becoming less responsive, less capable of forming habits. But the truth is, even in your 60s, 70s, or 80s, your brain is still remarkably plastic. That means it can adapt, it can form new habits, it can seek pleasure, and it can become conditioned, sometimes in ways we never intended. When you watch pornography, your brain releases a surge of dopamine, the same chemical that floods the brain. During moments of joy, reward, and connection in younger years, this dopamine rush may be balanced by the ups and downs of daily life, but in older age, when many people face isolation, retirement, or loss, those little moments of joy become more precious, and the brain, like all of us, starts looking for shortcuts to feel good again. At first, watching porn might feel exciting, even rejuvenating, but over time, that steady release of dopamine can start to create a pattern. The brain begins to associate pleasure not with a person or a touch, but with a screen, routine. A habit, and like any habit, it can grow. What once took a few minutes now stretches into an hour. What once was occasional becomes daily. The content might become more extreme, more novel, because the brain is always seeking that next hit of reward. This is what neuroscientists refer to as tolerance. The more you stimulate those reward pathways with porn, the less sensitive they become to the same level of input. So you search for something more intense, more shocking, just to feel the same. And while this isn't classified as a traditional addiction, the parallels are there: craving, compulsion, and eventual emotional dullness. What's even more concerning for older adults is the way this process impacts executive function. The part of the brain responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and goal setting. When overstimulated by porn, the brain may begin to prioritize short-term gratification over long-term well-being. That's when someone might choose screen time over meaningful interaction or skip social events to stay home alone, not because they want to, but because their brain has learned that it's easier, faster, and more predictable to get pleasure from a video than a conversation, and slowly, almost without noticing, a person can begin to lose interest in things that used to bring them joy. Gardening, music, family time, even physical affection. I've seen it happen more than once. A once vibrant personality begins to dim, not out of sadness, but out of disconnection. Now, this doesn't mean everyone who watches porn will experience these changes, but it does mean we need to pay attention. The brain is powerful, and it follows the paths we create for it. If we're not careful, those paths can lead us away from the very things we crave. Most intimacy connection, meaning, so how do you know if you're on a healthy path or if it's time to reassess? That's a deeply personal question, and the answer might begin with just one honest reflection, which brings us to the next part of this journey. Ask yourself, is porn helping or hurting you? If you're still with me and finding these insights meaningful, type 1 in the comments to let me know you're here and engaged. Let's keep going. Point number 4 is just ahead. 4. Ask yourself, is porn helping or hurting you? There's a moment of silence that often happens in my office right after someone gathers the courage to open up. It usually comes after a long pause, then a quiet confession. I don't even know if this is good for me anymore. It's not easy to say, especially for someone who has spent most of their life believing certain topics are too private to share. But that moment, that willingness to ask the question, is one of the most important steps a person can take. Asking yourself whether pornography is helping or hurting you isn't about shame or morality. It's about honesty. It's about listening to how you feel, not just in the moment, but afterward. Do you feel comforted or do you feel empty? Do you feel more connected to your body, your emotions, your partner? Or more disconnected and alone? For some, porn might serve as a source of relief, exploration, or emotional release. But for others, especially in later life, it becomes a kind of quiet escape, one that replaces, rather than enhances, real connection. And when that happens, the harm isn't always obvious. It shows up in subtle ways: avoiding phone calls, skipping social gatherings, losing interest in intimacy or affection, even feeling numb when you used to feel joy. Another way to know if pornography may be causing harm is by noticing your own patterns. Is it something you turn to out of desire or out of habit? Do you choose it over a walk, a conversation, or a warm cup of coffee shared with someone who cares about you? Is it helping you feel more human or less? I once spoke with a woman in her late 60s who shared something powerful. She said, "I used to watch when I felt lonely, but over time it stopped comforting me. It just reminded me how alone I was." That kind of honesty is rare, but it reveals something deeper. Sometimes what we use to soothe ourselves starts to quietly deepen the very pain we're trying to avoid. There are also physical signs. If you're finding it harder to feel aroused by your partner, or if intimacy has become more stressful than satisfying it. Might be time to pause and reflect. Our bodies are always speaking to us, so are our hearts. No one can answer these questions for you. But I found that when someone is brave enough to ask, they usually already know there's a quiet awareness inside, a sense that something isn't sitting right. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. And the good news is, you're not stuck. You're not too old to change a pattern. In fact, this stage of life can be one of the most powerful times to rewrite your story, to reconnect with yourself, and to choose connection over habit. So what do you do if you've realized that pornography isn't serving you anymore? What are some healthier, more fulfilling ways to reclaim that part of yourself, the part that still craves touch, meaning, and presence? Let's talk about that next, because there are real practical steps you can take starting today. 5 healthy alternatives and practical advice. If you've reached a point where you're questioning your relationship with pornography, that's not a failure. It's a beginning. I've seen many older adults take that first step with quiet courage, often wondering what now the answer isn't to feel ashamed or to simply stop. The answer lies in replacing what's not working with something that truly nurtures you. Start small. Rebuild intimacy with real connection. That could mean something as simple as holding hands with your partner, sitting a little closer, or talking openly about your desires. Maybe for the first time in years, if you're single, focus on reconnecting with others through shared experiences, joining a book club, walking. Group or even volunteering can restore a sense of closeness that no screen can provide. Try shifting moments of temptation into moments of intention when the urge to watch comes up. Take a walk. Write down what you're feeling. Call someone you trust. These aren't just distractions, they're acts of reclaiming your attention, your presence, your life. Therapy can be powerful too, not because something's wrong with you, but because something inside you is ready to grow. And sometimes you just need someone safe to help guide you through. That you are never too old to change, to deepen, or to feel whole again. And the truth is, the joy you're looking for might be closer than you think. But before we close, there's one more thing. I want to leave you with something deeply personal and important. Let's take a moment to bring everything together. 6. Conclusion. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you, not just for watching or reading, but for being open to a conversation that most people avoid, that takes real strength. Over the years, I've spoken with many older adults about their private struggles with intimacy, loneliness, and the quiet questions they carry about pornography. What I've learned is this: the issue isn't whether porn is good or bad, it's whether it's helping you feel more connected or more alone. We've explored both sides. The potential benefits like reigniting desire or offering comfort, and the risks like isolation, emotional numbness, and strained relationships. We've looked at how the aging brain responds to repeated stimulation, and we've asked the hard questions that deserve honest answers. Most importantly, we've opened the door to healthier alternatives because you are never too old to grow, to reconnect, or to rediscover intimacy in a deeper, more meaningful way. If you've been struggling silently, you're not alone, and you're not broken. You're human. And this chapter of life, just like any other, offers you the chance to live with more clarity, more connection, and more care. Whatever path you choose next, I hope it brings you closer to the life and the love you truly deserve.